good evening. Yes, we're on a death trip, baby. We are coming to you here live from the beautiful Rocky Mountains in Colorado. My name is Quinn Jacobson, and you guys know what's up, right? We're going to do this thing called the Studio Q Show Live. Thanks for coming in. Good to see you, Kareem and Jeffrey and Pablo, Mark Zimmerman, Linda, Dale lurks in the deep and dark oblivion. Will, good to see you. Man, I can't believe you guys are back. I thought I'd be in here talking to myself today, so thank you for hanging. I appreciate that. Hey, Tom and Mr. Smith from the UK, no longer standing by. That's wonderful. Good. This is going to be another trip. Hello, Philo. Thank you for coming in. You're a hardcore dude there, man. 1 o'clock in the morning. Maybe it's midnight now. I don't know. This second part, we're doing Becker's stuff. We're doing the death denial stuff. We're trying. People wrote me a couple of emails. Hey, Don from Texas. Good to see you, Don. Mark Zimmerman says, I thought I scared them all off. Not at all, Mark. No, you did a great job. My picking of the topics are probably a little more scary than anything, but people wrote me and asked me, why are you doing this? Why aren't you talking about wet collodion and iodides and double decomposition and how fast your lens is and what kind of collodion you use? Why are you doing that? We will do that. We're not abandoning that at all. Don't think that I'm now going to be a experimental social psychologist. I'm not. I'm trying to share, and Jeffrey wrote a nice email yesterday to me. I'm trying to share and inspire people to look into this and to see if this material resonates with you. I guarantee you it will. I'm just saying, if you give yourself a chance to maybe put the camera down for a minute, put the chemistry and the techniques and the lighting and all the stuff away for a minute, and try to gather some fodder, an English word we use, some material. Try to gather some material internally in your heart and your head to try to fashion ideas around your work and talk about your work. This is it. This is the mainspring of all kind of human activity that we're talking about. So that's kind of the preface. That's why I'm doing it. I'm going to do it whether you guys show up or not. And thankfully you do, but whether you guys show up or not, I'm going to do this somewhere at some time. Someone out there listening to this or watching this will say, oh my God, that is amazing. I got it. And you'll start connecting these dots together. And this will give you real good fuel to energize your work, to think about what you're doing in your work. Look, here's what I wrote this week to somebody. I said, look, we are working, and I'm going to address this with Sheldon Solomon as well, too, when I have him on. You guys can ask questions as well, too. But I really want to address the death anxiety and death denial that human beings as we face as an impetus or as a mainspring or a well, if you will, for artwork, and talk about how these ideas can kind of fashion and work around in the photography world. And then on top of that, what I was going to say is we work in an old dead process, right? Our images kind of reek of mortality, of death, of something long ago, of something that's gone, of something that's ephemeral. You saw Mark's work last week. We work in the very process that screams death denial. How can we not address this? How can we not talk about this out in the open and do these things? So that's quick response. I know you guys wrote emails asking me to go into depth of why I'm doing this. That's why I'm doing it. I'm trying to give you fodder for art and trying to help turn you on to what I've been turned on to, and try to help you get some of this thinking power going, right? We'll talk about all this. But good morning, John. Christopher from Chicago. Where's that at, Christopher? I'm not sure where you're at. Portugal. Hello, Portugal. Boguslav. My old computer was deaf. I'm in YouTube. That's okay, Boguslav. You're here, brother. That's what counts. And Oliver, I'm going to address your question today. Good to see you, Oliver from Germany. Oh, no worries. I'm going to stick around. We're going to talk about that in the technical section. And Ada, good afternoon from France. Good to see you, Ada. Good to see everybody. Okay, so let's get on this, guys. Let's and gals, let's get this stuff rocking and rolling. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to do a quick recap. I'm going to include some video clips today to make this a little bit more, less Quinn and more, Sheldon and Becker and all the big names there. I'm just communicating these ideas, or trying to. So we all remember that this is part 2. We're going to talk about culture and heroism. And I know these things, they're kind of strange words that way, because we have these ideas about what culture is and about what, see if I can present this full screen. There we go. We have ideas about what culture is, what heroism is, but Becker defines it a little different in the sense of death denial and death anxiety. Then we'll do some technical questions. Oliver's one of them. And then I grabbed some social media stuff. Recommended reading, recommended watching. I love this. Humankind cannot bear very much reality. That's what was on my mind all week, thinking about coming back in here and trying to go on this. I was like, are you guys gonna hang with me here for a minute? But you know who T.S. Eliot is, the great poet. Let's do a quick recap on Becker's work. This is coming from, and I gotta shrink this down because I want to go back here. This is coming from Becker's book, The Denial of Death. He was an anthropologist, and he died in 1973, and he was posthumously, after death, awarded the Pulitzer Prize for this book, The Denial of Death, that little guy you see in the corner there. So his basic premise is that the fear of death is the motivating principle for human behavior. That's probably the most critical thing you can big, high level, 60,000 foot view of these ideas. The fear of death motivates human behavior, period. Now, I know you say, I don't even think about death. What do you mean by that? You do think about death, and we'll talk about all these things. But we talked last week about the idea of to survive and reproduce, the basic function of any animal. Unfortunately, you and I are no different than, a lizard, an iguana, a parrot, chimp. Nothing that we're animals, right? DNA, blah, blah, blah. It's in service of that, survival and reproduction. So because of this great big thing here, this big frontal lobe, it gave us the intelligence to do what we do, right? To imagine things, build things, make things come to fruition. And it also gives us the knowledge that we are temporary and that we are going to die. That's a big one. And so humans need a buffer to keep this knowledge from consuming every thought and action, all that stuff. So we need buffers. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is cultural buffers. So let me do a couple of videos here. I'm going to see if this works. I don't have the videos embedded here. Let's see if this works.
The meaning of life. A question you've heard addressed a thousand times, but never answered properly. The reason we have so much trouble answering this question is because those who ask it are usually looking for a singular, monolithic, and definitive answer. Not a subjective answer, like it's whatever you want it to be, or it's whatever makes you happy, or it's whatever God's plan is. These popular responses tend to be distractions and don't actually address the intent behind the question. So with that said, what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? And why do we bother doing anything at all?
We've all asked that, right? We've all wondered that. And as artists, you've got to somehow deal with that in your artwork, whether you're dealing with it consciously or unconsciously. Most psychological activity is kind of repressed and unconscious. So the idea of looking at death anxiety as an artist, as a photographer, and as time goes on, as these sections go on, we're going to get closer and closer to bringing it to full fruition to you as a wet collodion artist or photographer, creator, and tie these ideas together. So we all have wondered that, right? Why am I here? What am I doing? What is the purpose of all this stuff? And so the basis of culture is to fill in and answer or step in and provide you buffers from thinking about this constantly and distract you basically from your death anxiety. So let's talk about that real quick.
Fortunately, all these questions actually have a very straightforward and obvious answer. First, close your eyes and try to imagine no longer being alive. It's difficult, isn't it? We can never truly understand what it would be like to no longer exist, and this gives us immense feelings of fear and discomfort. This state of mind is called death anxiety, and according to Pulitzer Prize-winning anthropologist Ernest Becker, it's the very reason that our concepts of meaning and value even exist at all.
Big things there, right? Those are huge comments to make, especially if you think about this. So we have this dilemma of the knowledge of our death, and we can't think about it constantly, so we need distractions. Cultural worldviews provide that distraction. I don't care what part of the world you're in. I don't care what religion you might be, what language you might speak. It doesn't matter. Your culture, wherever you are, provides these tools, if you will, to quell or stave off this thought of death constantly. If we were to think about our future, whether it's me getting up right now and stumbling and hitting my head and dying, or getting hit by a bus outside, well, I don't have any buses out here, but getting ran out, struck by lightning, whatever it might be, whenever it might be, if we were to think about that constantly, we just wouldn't do anything, right? So culture is in service of our death denial, and we're going to try to talk a little bit about culture here.
Being depressed about death all the time is not Darwinistically favorable, so human evolution resolved our death anxiety through the construction and maintenance of what anthropologists today call culture, implying that the core biological purpose of humanity, civilization, and life in general is to alleviate our death anxiety, either by prolonging our existence in some form or contributing to something that will outlast us. The meaning of life, evolutionarily speaking, is to live forever.
So symbolically, we have, cosmologically, we have this desire to symbolically live on forever. The homo mortalis, you'll hear Sheldon talk about that, the eternal man, that is kind of built into us, right? And we talked a little bit about not the physical body necessarily surviving, but the meaning surviving, our meaning, right? Producing something, artwork, a great piece of art, a book, belonging to a political or religious organization, something bigger, to be part of something. So your time on earth, your life doesn't die with your body, it lives on. This is a strong desire, whether we realize it or not. This is what we're doing. And it's in every culture. It doesn't matter.
So, how do we come to this conclusion? Well, initially, it was Charles Darwin who first gave us the notion that humans, like all other animals, are simply just meat machines, programmed to survive and reproduce in service of their genetics. All life is based on DNA. All DNA is based on molecular self-replication, and molecular self-replication is based on evolution. This fundamental truth of nature implies that the literal meaning of life is quite simply to survive and reproduce, suggesting that we're merely just evolutionary vehicles for our selfish genes to most efficiently propagate themselves and survive into the next generation. In general, different animals evolve different ways of embodying this literal meaning of life. Tigers developed claws, birds developed wings, and some reptiles developed camouflage. But what did humans develop? Well, we developed culture, the most powerful evolutionary trait of them all.
Wow, so true. We developed culture. We developed ways for human beings to deny their death, to quell the death anxiety, and to go on feeling like they had significance and purpose in a meaningful world. That's where we're at. That's what we're dealing with. And so if you live in that illusion, like we all do, we'll talk about heroism and the genuine hero here in a little bit. But if you live without illusions and you're a genuine hero, we'll talk about that. But most of the time, we live in some kind of illusion to deal with this death anxiety. And we all know this. I am not presenting anything to you right now that you don't know inside your heart and your head. You know this. You know this to be true because you're alive and you're a human being. So there's no getting out of this.
Culture allowed us to become uniquely social and cooperative creatures, organizing into institutions that would help us survive for increasingly longer periods of time, and is the very reason we dominate the Earth. To this day, humans are the only known species capable of developing culture. But where does it even come from? Simply put, culture came from the moment that our growing human brains became complex enough to develop death anxiety. Knowing that we will die one day creates such agitating psychological depression that it endangers our ability to survive. So evolution responded to this problem by selecting for culture activities and beliefs that would symbolically or literally grant us immortality. Again, what separates humans from all other animals is our ability to foresee our own deaths. And, believe it or not, this death anxiety is the driving force behind all cultures worldwide.
Yep. So here we are. We're sitting back in our worlds of culture, whatever that is. I think it's safe to say that the culture in this room or in this meeting or in this lecture, for most people watching and listening, culture has provided us art. In this specific case, photography. These are the tools we use to buffer death anxiety or to deal with those difficult topics that we try to deal with. And it's really interesting as you look through these filters of Becker and these theories, and you look at people and their artwork, and you start understanding and seeing this is nothing new. This has been talked about for centuries, maybe millennia, but never laid out like Becker's laid it out. I noticed we don't have any of our Dutch friends in the panel today, which is fine. But if you look at the Dutch Vanitas and you look at the whole scenario of the clock and a skull, time and death and everything melting, time, everything is in service and is appealing to that death anxiety and reminding that you will die, memento mori, right? Memento mori, as it were. Let me do this. Let me go over here and play this one. This one is in, I don't know why I can't do that, but this one, this is a woman, her name is Caitlin Doty. I don't know if you guys know who she is. She's a mortician. And she has a YouTube channel, and she's really interesting. She's really fascinatingly interesting. If you check her channel out. But this I found particularly interesting because people say, how do these ideas apply generally in the world? I thought about this in the America's election last year, November 2020, when Trump was elected. She happened to be that day in Bolivia, in South America. And this is her. She was giving a speech down there or something. And this is her talking about death anxiety and how Trump got elected. And it's a fascinating kind of, and very true, it's a fascinating kind of take on it. Check it out.
So I'm all alone in this kind of dingy hotel room in Bolivia. And I stayed up all last night watching the election results come in. And once I realized that Donald Trump had actually won the US election, my plan for today was just to stay in bed, weeping into a bag of Bolivian snack food. I know that people grieve in different ways, and if you're doing that today, I completely support you. But I can't because I am so angry. I am so filled with rage, but in a way I'm also inspired because we cannot allow our most vulnerable citizens to fall victim to this man. Maybe this will lose me a ton of subscribers, but honestly, I don't care. There are too many people whose actual lives are at stake. Muslims, immigrants, people of color, LGBT people, disabled people. I'm a woman and I'm terrified, and I'm a white woman who's frankly doing fine. So if I'm afraid, I can't even begin to imagine what others must be feeling like this morning. As we all are, I'm trying to think about what I can do to help. And what I do is talk about death. I am of the belief, and it's shared by many social scientists and psychologists, that death, specifically the fear of death, played a huge role in this election and how it turned out. And to be honest, I feel a tremendous amount of guilt that I didn't work to make those ties more explicit when I still had the chance. It's no secret that everywhere Trump went, he used the rhetoric of death. Immigrants are coming to murder us. Terrorists are coming to murder us. Black neighborhoods are filled with murder and death. He was priming people to believe that death was coming for them, reminding them they were under threat from some outside, usually brown-skinned menace. Here's why this is important. The work I do with death awareness is inspired by a man named Ernest Becker, who wrote a book called The Denial of Death. Becker also inspired 3 psychology professors who created a testable theory called terror management theory. In short, if someone has a real fear of death, which most Americans do, by priming them with these short bursts of threats to their mortality, in Trump's case, Islamic terrorists are coming to suicide bomb your town, or whatever other hateful rhetoric he's spewing that day, it causes people to double down on their nationalism, their racism, their xenophobia. These short bursts actually enhance people's prejudices. In a recent Trump-related terror management theory study, they took a large group of students and divided them. One group was prompted with ideas of death. You're gonna die, how do you feel about it? While the other group was just prompted with general thoughts of pain. Afterwards, they asked students questions about Trump's leadership and his good attributes, and regardless of political party, support for Trump went way up in the group that had been prompted with their own death. This correlation couldn't be more clear between a real deep underlying fear of death and Trump and his campaign exploiting it, and in turn, his supporters wanting a wall and wanting a ban and wanting to preserve real America. This is not new. We have these studies going back for years, including after 9/11, when the same fear drove us into the arms of George W. Bush, giving him the support to do pretty much whatever he wanted. This morning, I was so angry, I thought, I'm no longer a mortician. I quit. I am now a full-time Trump administration watchdog. But that is not realistic. And honestly, there is so much work to be done right here, making people aware of the massive role that death plays in their lives and all of the decisions that they make. I'm going to link to a lot more on terror management theory below. I really hope this does start a conversation, but if you post really misogynistic or racist things, your comments are getting deleted. I'm sorry. I'm not going to stop fighting on this, and I know that a lot of you aren't either. Death awareness is important, and the lives of the citizens of this country that many of us still love are important. Now that I have gotten this off my chest, I'm gonna go eat some of my feelings, and I hear there's a natural history museum here with some really bad taxidermy, so self-care.
Self-care.
Bye.
So I didn't play that because to be political or anything. I played it because the role, as she says, the role that death anxiety played in this election, and it plays out on everything. But I could almost guarantee you someone in that administration or election campaign back in the day, I guarantee you they knew or they know about Becker's theory. This is not, hidden away. And, we all respond to this stuff. So I wanted to share that with you. And she's funny. She does all kinds of stuff about, like she said, she's a mortician. So she deals with death all the time. So we just figured out what this culture is, right? The culture is a set of beliefs and values that shapes a society's way of life, whatever culture you're in. And it indicates what's meaningful and dignified in human living. Culture gives us a sense we're part of a meaningful universe. That's really important. Next week, we're going to talk about terror management theory, the very core of this, and we're going to get into Solomon and his partner, his colleagues' work, and look at this in depth. But culture is the driving force and gives us the means and the tools in which to masquerade and quell that death anxiety for whatever we are involved with. So let's look at these comments here. Oh, Chicago. Sorry, Christopher. Got you, brother. Got you. Chicago. Got Chicago. I got you. He's in Chicago. Hello, Rob. Dawn, this is Dawn. Let me put this up here. Dawn Rutledge Day here. I see many photographers exploiting the memento mori concept. Absolutely, everyone does, right? My COVID series used dead critters to represent mortality. It is a challenge not to tread on tropes. Yeah, well, here it is. Dawn, you're the perfect example of why I'm doing this. If I can give you the basis to dive into this deeper, you will discover photographically, artistically, conceptually, you will discover a whole new world waiting for you in informing your work and why you're doing what you're doing. We're just trying to figure this stuff out, right? We're trying to figure out why we're doing what we're doing. And when Solomon comes on, and even before then, we're going to talk about terror management theory. Solomon and his partners came up with this. The Worm at the Core, I'll talk about that a little bit next week too. The book, The Worm at the Core, is all about terror management theory. We've talked about all these concepts. Solomon and crew put them into practice, and there's data that shows this stuff is real. So Dawn, you're the reason. Thank you for making that comment. That's awesome. Trump won the 2020 election. Sorry, the 2016 election. Sorry. Good catch. That's where my mind was, right? Yeah, thanks, Thilo. No, he won the 2016 election. Sorry. Maureen, hey. Yeah, Linda says, eat my feelings. Yes. I know, she was all bummed about that, right? Here's some pushback. Unusama. That woman just shows pure leftist and one-sided mindset. Well, let's put the politics aside and let's talk about the terror, the death anxiety that drove a lot of that fear-mongering and those speeches. That was her point. Whether what political bent you're leaning on, it's not important. The important part is that you saw and you can connect those ideas of reminding people of their death and how their fear goes up and how they respond, whether it's voting, whether it's liking a certain group of people or not. We all have this. That's what I'm saying. So the fundamental function of culture is to help evade the awareness of our mortality. We get that. So that's culture. Let's talk just a little bit. Let me go back over here and see what we have here. Let's talk just a little bit about there's a little overview. I want to play this overview of Sheldon. I'm going to let him describe. I know some of this is reiterating, but I'm not sure how connected we're getting with this. So I'm going to play Sheldon here. It's just a few minutes long. Check him out and listen to what he says.
People, in some ways, are like all other creatures. We share a basic biological predisposition towards self-preservation in the interests of survival and reproduction. But what makes us unique is we've got this ginormous forebrain. And this allows us to do a lot of things, including think abstractly and symbolically, to the point where we're literally able to create things that don't even exist, or to think about them and then actually create them. We can think about things that have happened in the past, even before we've ever been here. We can think about things that might happen in the very distant future, and we can imagine ourselves in an infinite number of potential or possible scenarios. If you're smart enough to know that you're here, you necessarily realize that you will someday die, that you could die at any time for reasons that you could never anticipate or control, or that from a purely biological point of view, you're no fundamentally more significant or enduring than a lizard or a potato. You wouldn't be able to stand up in the morning if that's all you thought about. What our ancestors did, rather ingeniously, albeit quite unconsciously, is to solve the problem of how to manage the existential terror that is engendered by the awareness of death, which is in turn an unanticipated byproduct of our vast intelligence through the construction and maintenance of what the anthropologists call culture. Humanly constructed beliefs about the nature of reality that we share with other people that minimizes death anxiety by giving us each a sense that life has meaning and that we have value. All cultures provide an account of the origin of the universe. All cultures have prescriptions for how we should behave while we're here. All cultures have some hope of immortality, either literally through the heavens, souls, reincarnations, and afterlives of the world's great religions, or symbolically. You may realize that you won't be here forever, but you're still comforted by the possibility that a vestige of your existence will persist over time, perhaps by having children, by amassing great fortunes, by writing great books, or maybe making great works of art or scientific discoveries.
So there it is in a nutshell from the man himself, the guy that wrote the book on terror management theory, but he's the guy that started Becker's kind of coming into the mainstream. Here's an interesting point about Becker. Mind you, PhD, cultural anthropologist, PhD, taught in several universities in America, ended up in Vancouver, died in the hospital in Vancouver there, but he couldn't get a job. He couldn't get a job in America because of these kooky ideas. No one would give him attention. No one would pay attention to death anxiety, his theories about death denial, really crazy stuff, way ahead of his time. But Solomon and his colleagues picked that work up in the late 70s, early 80s in graduate school, and they have brought it to the forefront now. And they have actually, and that's next week, we're going to talk about this, terror management theory, the application of these ideas in real life. It's amazing. It will solidify these ideas, unbelievable, concrete. They'll fix in your head. You'll never forget them. Okay. And yeah, Mark Zimmer and I just replied to this. Using fear of death to get others elected is nonpartisan as in all cultures. Absolutely. He was responding to this person's comment. And I just put up there, yeah, exactly, Mark. His death anxiety is flaring up. So that's when we lash out, like what he just did. He doesn't know Caitlin. He doesn't know anything about her, really. She's a mortician. And so that person that just lashed out right there is a response. That's how people respond when their worldviews are challenged. This is the very thing that starts wars, that starts violence, that starts fights. Go on social media for 5 minutes and see if you can stay out of an argument. I mean, the stuff is, it is unbelievable. And it doesn't even matter what the argument's about, whether it's chemistry or politics or social issue, it doesn't matter. You have threatened my beliefs. You have challenged my very buffer, my immortality project, as Becker calls it, and now I'm threatened by that. So and I lash out. And in Sama, I don't know who you are, but I'm just saying that kind of comment is a reactionary. It's almost ad hominem. It's almost you're attacking Caitlin. You don't even know her, and you're attacking her as a person, right? So those kinds of reactions happen because of our knowledge of our impending doom, our death, right? And the lack of meaning of it all. So here we go. Enough of that. Enough of, let's talk about heroism. What is the urge to heroism? What is heroism? Why do individuals strive after heroism? And what are the different individual attempts to achieve heroism? So culture's the toolbox, and heroism are the tools within there that you can select your best way to live in your foolishness, like me. Pick your favorite one to live through, right? So let's see, Chopper said something here. Never thought of it before, but in some ways, death anxiety is used within the cultural subversion process to destroy cultures. Absolutely. That's man, see, you're already starting to connect those dots, brother. I love it. That's it, man. If people can come out of these little lectures and these little information videos on this and say, wow, I'm connecting these now, and live with it for some time, you'll see it everywhere. Just like when you buy a red Nissan, if you bought a red Nissan car, you'd see all kinds of red Nissan cars around you. Never before paid attention to it, right? This is the same way. And once you start digging in and getting down and down further and further, I'll try to get you started, but this is something you have to take on your own and investigate and see how it applies to you, and see what you notice out in the world. But very good. Excellent, Chopper. So let's talk about heroism. What are the tools inside that toolbox that can give us this ability to avert or quell this death anxiety? So heroism is the first and foremost a reflex of the terror of death. So let me see if I can have heroism.
Becker called this attempt to deny one's creatureliness and to assert one's cosmic significance the urge to heroism. Heroism is first and foremost a reflex of the terror of death, wrote Becker in The Denial of Death. Some individuals satiate their drive to heroism by achieving fame, fortune, or performing courageous acts, that is, by becoming what we typically think of as a hero. However, Becker realized that such a path is not possible for most, and instead the vast majority of people must strive for heroism in a much more limited manner by attributing meaningful significance to their day-to-day actions. Whether they find this through their job, their relationship with a significant other, raising a family, or their devotion to a political party, the key is they must convince themselves that their actions are contributing to something significant that will live on after they die.
So the first element is that reflex of the terror of death, and now we're looking for ways to live on, for the symbolic immortality. And I know people say, I don't ever think about that, but you do. Unconsciously, like I said, most psychological activity is like underneath, right? We don't know it's happening, and that's why we act out on this stuff. And Christopher, let's see. Absolutely, Chopper, we're creating a brand new culture is born in the fear of otherness. Christopher, this is what this whole thing is about, is othering, otherness. For almost 40 years, my photographic work has been on the other. That's my whole thing. My whole life, I've asked the question, why do we commit genocide on certain groups of people? Why do we treat this group of people or that group of people so differently than this group of people or that group of people, right? This whole idea of othering is at the core of Becker's theory of the denial of death, or the death anxiety that drives us to do bad things to other people. If you hang with me, Christopher, you'll see what I mean by that. Becker will tell you what that is. It's all about, right? I mean, not me. I'm just conveying information. But so, like he said in the little video clip there, that's from the Academy of Ideas. It can be their job, relationships, raising family, political group. Becker emphasizes this is a universal drive in all human beings, the desire to stand out, to be the one in creation. So most people would think that would be a pathology of psychosis, right? That would be some kind of psychological disease, like malignant narcissism or, ego, all those things. It's not. It's as natural in every human being as being hungry or being thirsty or needing sleep, any of those things. It's a basic function that we need. So the desire to stand out, to be the one in creation, those are big things, right? But that's in us. That's what drives us to do these things. Let's take a look at the insignificance of.
Becker thought that the desire to be a hero is present in all humans. He wrote that such a desire is too all-absorbing and relentless to be an aberration. It expresses the heart of the creature, the desire to stand out, to be the one in creation. However, the attempt to achieve the status of a hero, Becker warned, is destined for failure. Human beings are creatures whose cosmic significance does not rise above that of any other creature, and thus, in Becker's opinion, is virtually non-existent. Yet human beings cannot live with the awareness that the attempt to achieve heroism is destined for failure, and that therefore they are ultimately striving after an illusion.
So again, we have to synthesize it down. All these ideas and all these actions and attempts to quell this death anxiety will fail. They will all fail simply because we're all going to die, period. There's no getting out of this. So every attempt, the urge to heroism and whatever hero you select or can attempt to select, basically, will fail. So let's look at this here. Let's look at the types of heroes. So the types of heroes, or how humans strive for heroism, is religious, cultural, personal, and then the last one he talks a little bit about is genuine heroism. The question of human life is, on what level of illusion does one live? What is the best illusion under which to live? Or what is the most legitimate foolishness? I think the whole question would be answered in terms of how much freedom, dignity, and hope a given illusion provides. I think that's a wonderful response to that, and it's they're interesting choices.
Becker was not being condescending when he spoke of the inescapable need to strive after what is ultimately an illusion, for he realized that human beings, in being the only animal aware of the inevitability of death, are in a terrible existential predicament. He therefore concerned himself with critically analyzing the different ways individuals strive to attain heroism. The question of human life is, on what level of illusion does one live? This question poses an absolutely new question for the science of mental health, namely, what is the best illusion under which to live? Or, what is the most legitimate foolishness? I think the whole question would be answered in terms of how much freedom, dignity, and hope a given illusion provides.
Excellent. Just kind of reiterating those things there. So cultural heroism is being a cog in the heroic machine, right? Your job, your political group, anything like that. Man earns his feeling of worth by following the lines of authority and power. Each human slave nods to the next. Each earns his feeling of worth by doing the unquestioned good. I only followed orders is the phrase that rankles in the breast of modern man. Absolutely. So here, the cultural hero will fail, right? Most of us can't be, Ringo Starr or whatever, any of these, I don't even know, these famous people, right? So we reach out in these other different ways to try to be a hero and follow an authority or a power. We've seen that in America recently, for sure. Personal heroism. Becker saw this urge as an exercise in futility. He described this type of individual as one who tries to be a god unto himself, the master of his fate, a self-created man. He will not be merely the pawns of others or society. He won't be a passive sufferer, a secret dreamer nursing his own inner flame into oblivion. This person finds their authentic talent and then uses this talent as a sole measurement of their worth. Look around the art world. Look around the photography world. Wow. I think we have some people out there, maybe including myself, reaching for this personal heroism. If I were asked for the single most striking insight into human nature and the human condition, it would be this, that no person is strong enough to support the meaning of his or her life unaided by something outside him. That's Angel in Armor. That's another book by Becker, but we won't go there right now. But great quote, though. And so, recap. Religious heroism, Becker believes that's no longer a possibility. We really didn't get to talk about this much, but the age of enlightenment, the age of reason, these things for a lot of people aren't a legitimate form of quelling death anxiety or death denial. So religious heroism isn't really valid, although there's a lot of people that are, I may take sides with that because I know a lot of folks that are cling to that and use that as their buffer. Cultural heroism, we just talked about, transforms individuals into blind conformists. And personal heroism, doomed to fail, right? We can't be these little gods doing this stuff. So what are we supposed to do? Becker said that this fourth type of heroism is rare, but does exist. Genuine heroism. Check this out. Individuals capable of genuine heroism don't require illusions to live. That's an amazing statement right there. Becker said, I think that that taking this life seriously means something such as this, that whatever man does on this planet has to be done in the lived truth of the terror of creation, of the grotesque, of the rumble of panic underneath everything. Otherwise, it is false. So think about that statement for a little while. Think about that comment, meaning to be a genuine hero, to live your life with a full knowledge of your death, impending death, and all that psychological stuff underneath, the rumbling every day in you, and you're still living, knowing full well, without illusions, of what this is all about. Big stuff there, man. I'm wrestling with that myself. Big stuff. So let's see, where were we here? Something to genuine, yes. Okay, so Becker said the most that any of us, so the genuine hero lives with an attitude of resignation that is not a pessimist denial of death, right? People say, oh, he's just being a pessimist. No, rather they recognize the awesome powers of the universe dwarf man and his petty concerns. Have you ever had that feeling of like, wow, a bunch of stuff going on, and then, all of a sudden you just realize, wow, this is just not, you have this moment of clarity of the genuine hero kind of thing. Becker said, the most that any one of us can seem to do is to fashion something, an object or ourselves, and drop it into the confusion, make an offering of it, so to speak, to the life force. I think that's pretty good, whatever that means. And we're going to talk about solutions to this. This is a little more conceptual here, but the person who denies their own mortality is afraid to live. But because of this fear, life becomes impossible. And here there is a poetic justice. You cannot escape death by controlling life, no matter how hard you try. That is a good lesson for some folks out there. Now, I'm going to give you a little more of Sheldon here. Like I said, we're going to have him on this show in a couple of weeks. And I want to let him talk about these defenses, because this is the natural question. So, wow, Quinn, this is a bummer. You're laying all this stuff out. So what are the answers? What do you do with this stuff? Listen to what Sheldon says here.
In your work, you focus on defenses against death anxiety that help keep it out of people's awareness. I was wondering if you could describe those, a little bit of what you see as the main defenses against death anxiety.
Yeah, that's a good question. Clearly one defense is having a designated inferior. It's an unsavory one, but we think, and remember.
Okay, so you guys know what the designated in-house inferior is? That's what Christopher just talked about, othering. Find someone, have a people or a group in your community that you can other, a designated in-house inferior. You'll hear Sheldon talk about that a lot.
Mark Landau and Daniel Sullivan talked about this in Israel, that unfortunately, it may be the case that humans require scapegoats and hate objects. I'm going to butcher my description of their. They showed that people were much happier when they had an ambiguous enemy upon which they could project their dis-ease.
How about that?
So that's one way that people keep death anxiety at bay. As you know from your own work, another way is what Kierkegaard described as tranquilizing oneself with the trivial. And I love that term. Again, back to the geniuses twisting a phrase. You can just keep yourself in a drunken stupor as a way to mitigate anxiety. And certainly there's no shortage of people that resort to that today or historically. We know that watching television is a non-pharmacological stupor. Shopping appears to do the trick. And I say all these things, based on our research as well as just anecdotal contention. So each of these things, we know that death reminders make people more antagonistic towards out-group members, for example. And we know that in the aftermath, for example, of September 11th, 2001, that drug and alcohol consumption went way up. Blockbuster Video had their best month ever. Gambling went way up. People bought a whole lot of guns. And so that would be another way to manage death anxiety. Some people become more attached in a dogmatic sense to their religious beliefs. But from what I've said so far, though, it sure sounds like everything that one does to manage death anxiety is necessarily unfortunate and malignant. And I don't believe that to be the case. I think there are more benign forms of managing death anxiety. And I say this again, both as an anecdotal statement, but also based on the research. And so the Israelis, Mario Mikulincer and Gilad Hirschberger and Victor Florian, I think they've shown that one way to manage death anxiety is to take comfort in your relationships, particularly those with significant others. And okay, so some people call that a defense, but I don't see that starting wars or depressions. So be it. If you become more attached, and this is only true for those who are securely attached, by the way. So if a securely attached person manages death anxiety by wanting to be closer to their people, I have a hard time seeing that as problematic. I think that there's a distinction also to be made. Alport made a distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic religiosity. And, the extrinsic type would be your kind of fundamentalist, God wrote the Bible, and if you don't agree with every word, we'll kill you. Then there's the more intrinsic religion. That's more of the hard place as opposed to the rock, which is I have these strong spiritual beliefs, even if they are vague and inchoate. And I also see no harm in someone becoming more, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Walt Whitman, Thoreau, I love life and nature. I see no harm in that either. Having said that, though, and again, in the spirit of Becker's work and your work, I think that one could argue and would be right if you said, yes, there's no harm there, but psychologically speaking, and let's say in the spirit, how do you pronounce his name, Yala? I like his point in existential psychotherapy, and he's not the only one that says this. In fact, I like the way Camus put it in one of his notebooks when he scribbled in the margin, come to terms with death, thereafter anything is possible. You can only go so far with managing death anxiety by sweeping it under the psychological rug. Ultimately, you got to bring it out and, in the Kierkegaardian sense, enroll in the school of anxiety, which cannot be accomplished, as you know, without an incredible amount of anxiety and discomfort. Because to recognize that you are finite and not particularly pleased by that prospect, is to momentarily divest yourself of all of the culturally and interpersonally constructed delusions and fantasy bonds that have sustained you for your whole life. And you can't do that without momentarily, psychologically speaking, dangling on the precipice of oblivion. But then and only then can that real kernel of who and what you are begin to emerge. And that's when we're going to see people, myself included, at their best.
Here's the thing. I think he is referring to, or could be referring to as well, too. I think psychedelics are going to come on the scene soon. I think psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, some of these other hallucinogens. What he's talking about there, that psychological precipice of alleviating yourself of all these fantasies and illusions, if you can even do it. Can you imagine the type of art or the type of insight and the creative insight you would have to strip yourself of all this baggage and be able to think in those terms? I mean, we're talking about, in this context of creating art, we're talking about going to places, I think all of these great artists have gone. I don't care if they're photographers or writers or filmmakers, whatever. But he's talking exactly about that, shedding that baggage and coming to the realization. I think most people would need some kind of intervention like hallucinogenics or something to be able to do that. That's kind of my opinion. McKenna, if you look at, there's a whole bunch of work now surrounding psychedelics and mental health and things like that. So interesting, though. I wanted to throw that in. No problem, Hank. We'll see you, brother. So let's see. Let's see. I like these comments. That's absolutely, Chopper. We're creating brand new cultures born on the other night. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit. There's Don. Some heroes do not stand out. Exactly. The quiet hero has motivations that are more other-oriented than ego-oriented. Fred Rogers. Yeah, that's a great conversation to have, Don. That really is. That's an interesting. Yeah, I'd have to think about that a little bit. Christopher says, I think I'm realizing my primary death anxiety defense has been buying more lenses. I don't think it's working. Yes, brother, you are connecting the dots, albeit they're small dots. That is definitely, we used to call it GAS, G-A-S, gear acquisition syndrome, right? So you have these two groups of photographers. The biggest group wants to talk about chemistry and cameras and what kind of tripod, what f-stop did you use on that photo, and then the others want to talk more conceptual, right? More artistic and creative. Where did these ideas come from? Where's the basis behind all this? That kind of thing. So yes, gear acquisition syndrome is definitely a failure for death anxiety. So Linda says, so if you overcome your anxiety and fear of your death, you are truly living. Linda, that's exactly that's stated in a way that we can never really overcome it, but your comment is absolutely correct. Like Albert Camus said, right in the margins of his book there, if you can come to terms with death, you can come to terms with anything, basically is what he said. So now we have to define what is coming to terms with or overcoming your death anxiety. But you're right, you're truly living free when you can shed that baggage. And my main interest in this is if artists can shed that baggage, what kind of art can we produce? What kind of ideas can we put into the world? Albeit they're immortality projects and all this kind of stuff, all that. But what would they be? Very good, though, Linda. I like it. Seems like through history, when people were under the fear of death or after its greatest work, another great comment. We're going to get into that. Chopper, save that thought for later. You're absolutely correct about that. You've heard this saying, after the plague came the Renaissance. You've heard that, right? I mean, so we're going to talk about that because all this rambling that I'm doing is going to lead you into a specific area of art, photography, creativity, meaning, death anxiety, all of that. So hopefully you hang around to the end and we'll definitely get to that. So let's go back to the, I think we're pretty much there. Next week, I primed you a little bit. We'll talk about terror management theory. This is where we're going to get into the application of these ideas. Meaning, what do you mean you act differently when you're reminded of your death? What do you do? We're going to talk about some court judges in Tucson, Arizona. We're going to talk about some Dutch people that were surveyed about natural lands in suburbia. We're going to look at some of these ideas put into practice and look at the results. And it's amazing stuff. It's amazing stuff. So before I go on, is there any questions on that? I know I don't expect any, but if there are, please shoot them out. Or comments? Anything you want to throw out there before we go on to this other stuff? Okay, let's do this. Let's go over and do this. Let's talk about. I wonder why my view present. I wonder why my computer is all of a sudden not letting me look at full screen in here. Anyway, let's talk about this. This is technical kit. So take your scoops and flip them around or do whatever you have to do. We're gonna switch gears a little bit here. I can't switch gears that fast myself, but I'll try. Technical. This came up on Facebook the other day. I just want to tell you, if you're one of the people that are responding here in the last comments here, I just want to ask you to listen to what I'm saying here, just briefly, just for a second. This image is obviously very easy to see that what's wrong with it, right? We have all kinds of oyster stains here, drip from the edge. His plate holder was dirty or something. He's got massive overdevelopment here, so he went too long on the developer. That's what's creating these striations. You can tell he sensitized the plate that way and all this stuff. So I just went in and said, the white stuff is organic material, oysters. You have a lot of undeveloped free silver on the plate, that's unexposed silver that's developed. Then I said, if you run water and use a cotton ball, those will wipe off. You need more exposure, less development, and restrain your developer more. Then after I said that, this person says you're putting your plate in too early. Wait till you get a tacky thumb. That's fine to say that, but he's not. That's not the problem. There are still solvents on your plate when you submerge it, making those ribbons most visible in the dark areas. That, Victor, I'm sorry. No, wrong. And then this Marcin says, check and see if these lines after the silver bath, before exposure, the lines are parallel to moving, putting in the plate. I once had the same change every part of the process, step by step, changeable. Look, on and on and on. No, it's not. So basically what he says, he redid his whole process, and then when he left the plate in for a little longer, all this stuff went away. Those are not accurate answers. And my point here is, and I'm not trying to pick on these people, I'm just saying, please chime in if you want to on these technical questions, but put a caveat like, you know, I don't know what I'm talking about, but this is what happened to me kind of thing, right? Because what happens now is if this guy, that's why I had to chime in. I don't have time to chime in on all these things, but this guy could read that and start over. And then what happens to me, I get flooded in my inbox. And then other people start asking about this or that or the other, right? So this, I get this trickle down effect from these technical questions. And when people, and this is my board, this is on Facebook, this is my wet collodion board. That's why I feel free to share it here. When people chime in like this on my board, I don't want to delete their comments. I want to try to help people understand why these things are wrong. And the advice they're giving people will just create more problems for the person. So I'm not saying don't chime in to try to help, but put a caveat up there. You guys are talking like this is gospel, and you're absolutely incorrect. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Kind of a problem there for me a little bit because it trickles down onto me. And then Oliver from Germany. He wrote and said, I hope you have a lot of work in beautiful home in Colorado. Yes, Oliver, we're living up here. We love it. Thank you so much. I'm writing you again because the developer lines on his plate. He says a lot of artists use these. He doesn't like them. And so he put some more alcohol into the developer and it actually worked better. Good, that's perfect. So if you have developer sweeps on your plate, it means you don't have enough alcohol to flow that developer over the plate, and you'll get the start and stops and put developer lines or sweeps. But when it comes to varnish, some images vanish. I love your word there. You use vanish. Vanish and varnish are so close in English, I had to kind of double take. So what's Oliver talking about here? He's talking about he probably used an older collodion to make that image. And then he has this strong alcohol in his varnish. And that old collodion, remember, if we use NH4I, it's not quite as stable. You use the old stuff, and you use alcohol that's too strong in your varnish, you'll melt that image away. So what I recommend people now, just add 10 drops of distilled water to 250 mils of your varnish. You won't have any of the problem. Don't over add the water, but that will prevent your image from, quote, melting away or vanishing, as Oliver says. So I thought, says I thought alcohol evaporates over time. It does evaporate, but you know what's interesting about the tree sap or the varnish? That's like that holds it in tight. So you'd have to have quite a long exposure with wide open to evaporate the alcohol out of your varnish. It'd take some time. Collodion as well too, not quite as slow. But so those are the two questions that I have. My recommended reading is The Birth and Death of Meaning by Ernest Becker. This is the second revision in September 71. Human fear and mortality, the fear of death that humans experience, though, lies not so much in the death of the body, but in the death of meaning. And we'll talk more about this and we talked a little bit about it already, but as we go along, the death of meaning really weighs on us more than anything, for it's meaning that defines the human self and society. And then finally, has anyone seen this film, The Philosopher Kings? You should watch it. It's available online. Really something different, but again, this is my way of dealing with my own interest in death anxiety and otherness. So this is about janitors, believe it or not, janitors. Early in this uneven yet moving documentary, a university janitor greets a woman exiting the restroom he's about to clean. She doesn't respond. Neither does she look at him nor acknowledge his presence in any way. In The Philosopher Kings, Director Patrick Shen insists that we look at individuals unusually regulated to the margins. This is what interests me the most. This ties in beautifully and dovetails beautifully with death denial and death anxiety, otherness, lashing out at people who are different, wanting that designated in-house inferior, as Sheldon talks about. The straightforward insistence is the lifeblood of the film, which profiles 8 people who work as custodians at institutions of higher learning. The sole woman notes that when she tells people what she does, they usually clam up, certain that nothing interesting could possibly ensue. Their loss. And it's interesting. Philosopher King, according to Plato, a philosopher king is a ruler who possesses both a love of wisdom, right? Philosophia, a love of wisdom, as well as intelligence, reliability, and a willingness to live a simple life. Isn't that beautiful? Such are the rulers of his utopian city, Callipolis, however you want to say that, the Greek city. So watch that. It's free. It's online. You can go find it on YouTube. Maybe I'll play the clip here. Let's see if I can play the clip. They're the same ones that did Fleeing Death, or Flee from Death.
You think about all the people in the world that we never see.
My real father, he was very abusive.
Nobody talked about what went on.
When we live here today, do you have any idea what a job we're leaving for the people who are going to come in here and have to clean these chairs up and pick up after us?
I'm a custodian. Okay, what do you know about a custodian? Custodian cleans restrooms. Sometimes I'll talk to people and they won't even look at me.
Do you have any idea what they make or how they support themselves or their children? Or whether they believe anyone ever sees them?
Yo pienso que todo lo que te sucede o lo que te vas a hacer, pienso que ya está escrito.
I believe everybody deserves to live right, have food to eat. I got a very big responsibility.
I think it's a miracle that we're here. I think it's a miracle that life exists, even if this is the only place in the universe that exists. Whether or not that's religious or not, I think it's incredible, and I'm very happy to have this opportunity to experience, even if it's painful.
So there you go. Something worthwhile if you're into that, if you like that kind of stuff, if you like the idea, if you wonder why human beings act the way they do and how we treat one another and the marginalized communities, the missing people. Maybe you've been marginalized yourself. Maybe you are part of a marginalized community. You know this stuff well. Everyone will be marginalized at some point in their life, whether it's older and you can't walk or you can't hear, you can't see. People will be marginalized. My work, my photographic work, has been based on otherness. This is my entire career. That's why I'm enamored with Becker and Solomon and these theories, trying to put and support, inform my work, put that underpinning in my work and help people understand why I do what I do and maybe interest them. Yes, oh, you're very welcome, Boguslaw. Thank you very much. I appreciate hearing that, brother. No problem, Barbara. Yeah, Oliver, check that out. He'll try that out. Don says these Philosopher Kings are an example of quite. That's why I thought you might like that, Don. That's exactly why when I saw your comment, I thought you'd like that. And so right, Peter. You can learn absolutely true. You don't need a PhD or little number or letters behind your name. You don't need any of that. You can be a true, authentic, genuine hero and help people a lot, I think. Thanks for the Food for Inspiration lectures. Thank you so much, Will. You're a good man. I appreciate hearing that. And I appreciate everybody showing up today, man. Thank you, Jeffrey. I come in here some weeks thinking that I'll just be talking to a computer. And so I'm so grateful you guys show up. And I hope you get something out of it. If it's just something to kick around in your head, throw a little stone in your shoe. Ultimately, my goal, though, is to have you guys, everyone that watches or listen to these, bring these ideas in and see if they don't help you inform your work, support your work, give that great foundation for your work, that you can speak confidently, authentically, honestly about what you do and why you do it. The biggest problem that I see artists have, not just photographers, but all kind of creative people in general, is they're not really sure the direction in which or what they're interested in. I don't know what to do. I mean, I feel like I'm interested. I like to photograph roses and I like to photograph this and I like to do that and paint that and sculpt that, but I don't have a direction, right? So they're playing with the materials. They just don't have the meaning yet. These kinds of lectures and these kinds of ideas, although they may not be the most popular in the biggest, widest circles of photography, there are a few of you out there that will grab these, embrace them, and I'm happy to be part of that journey if I can help, because that's what I've tried to do. That's what I'm trying to do now. This next body of work that I'm starting to work on this year, you'll see Becker infused in it everywhere. All these ideas will be infused in this book, in this work. So that's what I'm doing. I hope some of it can rub off on you. I appreciate your time. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for last week, too. Next week, thank you, Oliver. Next week, thank you, Linda. You have a great Saturday, too. Yeah, Saturday evening. Thank you, Thilo. Thank you very much. Next week, we have terror management theory, which will dovetail beautifully into Aaron Mattsson's work. He's in Sweden. I don't know if he's in Gothenburg or north of there. He's in Sweden. I met him when I taught a workshop up in Gothenburg there. And he's going to share his work, Nacht Sanctum, next week, Holy Night. So it'll dovetail beautifully into what we're talking about. And hopefully we're open to some new ideas and some other ideas and some sharing work and help people see what they're doing and understand better, or have a deeper insight too, right? Sharing these ideas and keeping these psychological metaphors in mind. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ada. I appreciate that. Yes,
I
please.
have a short question. Do you have time?
I absolutely. I love it.
Yeah. Today I was doing varnishing. I had some 20-25 plates, and something happened to me for the first time.
Yeah?
And everything went okay, but 2 plates, the varnish vanished. And I want to show you.
Wow. I've never heard of disappearing varnish, but this is what's fun. Let's look at it.
Something like that happened. I don't know.
Like, the varnish, this, we can't quite make that out, I don't think.
I'll try to get the white paper, just a second.
Yeah, that would help for sure. For sure.
The image kind of disappeared.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It shouldn't be the alcohol in the varnish because it was the same varnish I used. And then I thought on this one, I used the collodion, which was over 18 months old.
There you go.
Yeah. And I used the same collodion for positives and negatives. Nothing happened with the positives, but only the negative disappeared. Then I thought maybe during redevelopment, adding all that iodine and pyro made the collodion more weaker and it couldn't resist.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You nailed. Very good, Kareem. That's a great. Thank you for sharing that, by the way, too, because this is going to come up all the time, I'm sure. That the image that he just showed, what he's saying in a nutshell, he said, "Wait a minute. Same varnish I used. I did use an older collodion, but I also made positives with that older collodion and didn't have the image disintegrate or melt or have any problems." Then he added, "I was wondering, does the iodine that we resensitize or rehalogenate the negative weaken it, or what about the pyro?" The iodine is fine, Kareem. The iodine is fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's the pyro. The pyro will shrink
acid.
Yes, and weaken the structure. Exactly. You had a double whammy there. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Great, though. You answered your own question, which is great.
That's something to keep in mind with the old collodion. Yeah.
Hey, anytime you can bring a technical question on here that hasn't been seen or widely talked about, it's a good thing because people will come back through and see this stuff. So, yes, it's or somebody will, wait a minute. I saw something on YouTube the other day or heard people talking. Wait a minute. I know what's up with that. So, yes. This is why we albuminize the edge of the plate or do the whole albumin over the whole glass, is because when we pour pyrogalic acid on that collodion and silver to redevelop it, that pyro shrinks, and it's hard on nitrocellulose. Pyrogalic acid is very vigorous, very strong on that collodion. So that's why we don't want it to pick up off the edges, or if we work it a lot, like Kareem just said, and then you use something powerful and strong on it, like a varnish, you can have that stuff happen for sure. It was an interesting pattern on his image.
Yeah, so if I had albuminized the whole glass, would that help?
Unfortunately not. It would help definitely if you had attachment problems, right? But even edging it will help there. But that's unfortunately underneath. What you're talking about is the actual nitrocellulose being damaged by the pyrogalic acid. And by the way, do you know how pyrogalic acid is made?
From plant?
Yeah. Kareem, you know the cover of my book? Oh, right there. It's on the screen. You see what that rabbit head is sitting on? That's called the gall nut. It's from oak trees. These gall nuts are heated high. They got materials inside. They're heated to an extremely high temperature, some compounds added, and you form this white powder called pyrogalic acid.
Okay.
So that very gall nut sitting on the cover, just a little tidbit, just a little hidden Easter egg. That's all I'm saying. That's good stuff, guys. I appreciate it. Yeah, and Dale, this is good. Dale, you guys know this. I talk about, I don't know why I say this. I get up very early every day, and I answer emails or prepare for my work 3-4 hours. I get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, whatever, usually 4:30. And I work for hours. And Dale's like 3 hours ahead of me, so he's usually chiming in on messaging. And he asked me a question this morning. I guess I was still in a stupor, not enough coffee, but he asked me a question. I started rambling on about something. He said, "Oh, wait a minute, I answered my own question." And so that's where that reference comes from. So, let's see. Oliver says, if using iron sulfide instead of pyro, no. Oliver, that's a great question. Oliver's asking, what if you use ferrous sulfate as a redeveloper rather than pyro? No, pyro's really hard. Although ferrous sulfate redevelopment is going to take you a little more. You might have to make it a little stronger, blah, blah, blah. But pyro is a culprit. It's hard on basically plastic, which is nitrocellulose. So yeah, good stuff, guys. Yeah. Oh, and Pablo says, yes. Pablo says pyro shrinks collodion. Yes, that is correct, Pablo. And he says, seems that pyro works better with fresher collodion. Absolutely. Yes. In fact, the old literature will tell you that as well, too. The old literature will always talk about fresh solutions and all those kinds of things. So yeah, you guys are on it, man. I love it. I love it. That's so cool. So yeah, next week, tear management theory for a half an hour. Then we'll get we'll get Aaron in here. Aaron has actually said he just finished teaching a workshop today. So it's like 7 or 8 o'clock in Sweden now. So he'll be in here next week. That knocked Sanctum. You'll like the work. He's shown it before. Not here, but in a gallery or exhibitions. And we'll talk about how that'll dovetail into Becker's work. This will be the first entry into applying these theories, both in real life situations and for creative work. And then the following week, we'll do just a brush up again. And then a week after that, I'm going to have Sheldon come on, and we'll ask him questions. And the questions we want to ask him will be directed toward this, the idea. I have two ideas, actually. Creativity, death anxiety and creativity. And we kind of know these answers, but I want to dig down into the deeper stuff. And then secondly, I want to talk about the pandemic and how we are constantly reminded of our death in this pandemic, right? Whether we put a mask on. Oh, I got my shot. Speaking of death denial, I got my first shot. But I want to ask him about living in this pandemic and what that's doing. Because I've been reading statistics now, at least in America, in the United States, suicides way up, violent crime way up, alcoholism, drug abuse way up. So I want to try to talk about tying in some of these things. And I also want to encourage everyone to think about death anxiety, the denial of death, terror management theory, all these things in reference to your own artwork and how you can pull some of these ideas in and start applying them and then share them. Because, man, I want to learn. I want to learn what you're thinking about, what you're doing, and how you're applying. Because this is real stuff. And next week, you're going to see the first of where it's actually applied in real life that shows this empirical data that we react our whole life, whether we're conscious or unconscious of it, psychologically unconscious of it, our whole life, every day is in service of this death anxiety. I'm on here right now doing this in service of that death anxiety. I consciously know that, but unconsciously, we're built that way. So anyway, enough of that. We will see you next week. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate each and every one of you, your support, your kindness, coming in here and spending this time with me and listening to me ramble about these crazy ideas that nobody, like, what the hell is this guy talking about, right? So I appreciate that, even if you're indulging me. Come next week, bring your technical questions, bring your philosophical, your conceptual questions. Read up on Becker, read up on Solomon. Come in and ask some questions next week if you have them. I'd love to start engaging. And I love the comments on YouTube today. They were really great. Thank you, everyone. Stay healthy, stay happy, stay safe. We'll see you next Saturday. Ciao.